right, everybody, welcome to BO Boys for Tuesday, December 13th. Fuck it, it's a raw feed. We're doing it live, emergency style. I'm Clayton.
Yeah, I'm Pat, also here for the emergency episode. Guys, we said that the next time we'd be on mic, we'd be talking about the opening weekend of Avatar or a preview episode of Avatar Way of Water, but we had to amend that. We had to go to an emergency episode because, Clayton, we have late breaking news just broke about the saga of Dwayne The Rock Johnson, Black Adam, Warner Brothers, Deadline, and everything that's going on there. Of course, last weekend, Clayton, or last week, we talked about how Deadline, Anthony D stands for Dwayne D'Alessandro, wrote a puff piece in Deadline about how Black Adam supposedly is going to be profitable. The Rock then tweeted out how, look, my movie's going to be profitable, a thing that just regular movie stars do all the time, right? They tweet out, hey, my movie's going to be profitable. Deadline had this long article showing, oh, it's going to make all this money in home video and cable reruns and VOD and all this stuff, trying to say Black Adam would not be a flop. So that was last week. And then this week, bombshell drops. Former guest of the BO Boys, Matt Bellany, he writes Puck News, and he wrote that high-ranking executives at Warner Brothers believe that The Rock, he sent false information, misleading numbers to Deadline. He was the source of that Deadline article saying that Black Adam would be profitable. And not just that he was the source, but he was the source with very misleading information. So that is the bombshell over at Puck News from Matt Bellany. And that is where we stand right now. Dwayne The Rock Johnson feeding misleading information to Anthony D. D stands for Dwayne D'Alessandro over at Deadline. Clayton, I mean, this must be how Woodward and Bernstein felt when they first met Deep Throat in that parking lot. They just must have felt like, what is going on here? The world is turning upside down. What am I seeing? What is this? Clayton, we've met our Deep Throat. And we've got our Richard Nixon, who is Dwayne The Rock Johnson. How are you feeling about all this?
Well, but that makes The Rock Deep Throat as well.
He's Nixon and he's Deep Throat, but he's bad Deep Throat. I think in this version there are multiple Deep Throats here, and he's the one who is helping Nixon.
So
and he's also
these
Nixon.
Numbers. Here's the thing: he leaked these numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Deadline ran with it. Anthony D. Alessandro may stand for Dan Rather. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
And listen, let's talk first about what this does for The Rock. I mean, it's what we've said before. I mean, if you listen to our episode where we talked about this, we knew this was horse pucky.
Yeah.
I mean, we knew it.
Yeah.
And the fact that it was verified was just kind of an afterthought. I mean, this is great. Bellany, great man, doing the work, getting in there, doing reporting, not just taking leaked information at face value, talking to people. And Warner Brothers, listen, that's his bosses. That's The Rock's bosses, or at least were. I mean, he's no longer going to be affiliated. But they were like, no, this is BS. They're calling BS on numbers that would make a movie that they released profitable.
Yep.
Like, that's how big this is.
Mm-hmm.
Why, if they had any further interest in The Rock, would they say, no, that's all bullshit. It's not going to be profitable. And even Bellany even says, these things tend to become profitable at some juncture, right? I mean, down the line, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, yes. Will this movie have made a few $1 million profit, a few $100,000 profit? Probably.
Right.
Because that's just how things work. When a movie's not a complete disaster, right? Like Strange World. But still, this profitability that The Rock laid out, or whoever he got to cook these books laid out, is just not reality.
It hinges again on cable airings and VOD and all these ancillaries that should be icing on the cake for a blockbuster superhero movie. These should not be the numbers that he's hinging profitability on. And that's what Bellany says. When you go deep enough, when you go long enough from the release of a movie, over the course of time, everything ends up being profitable. Geely is probably profitable at this point from how many rentals it had at video stores and airings on basic cable. Everything becomes profitable someday. But a movie like Black Adam, it's considered a bomb because it bombed in movie theaters and it was supposed to turn a profit in movie theaters. And like you said, the fact that Warner Brothers is, it didn't release a statement saying The Rock is lying. It didn't release a statement saying Warner Brothers wants to set the record straight, that Deadline article was false, Black Adam was a bomb. That's not what's going to happen. But they got their message out because they talked to Matt Bellany. So Warner Brothers obviously wanted it to get out that the Deadline article was BS, that Dwayne The Rock Johnson's numbers are BS. And basically that tells you all you need to know about the future of Black Adam and the future of Dwayne Johnson in the DCU. It is James Gunn and the Warner Brothers executives putting it out there. This movie was not successful. We're moving on, because this is them embarrassing Dwayne The Rock Johnson when they put it out there and tell Matt Bellany that those numbers were misleading, that those numbers came from Dwayne The Rock Johnson. That is DCU saying, wiping their hands clean. And the wannabe boys, wannabe girls, wannabe people who are not just listening to us, but are watching us on YouTube, they saw me wipe my hands clean. And that is what James Gunn has done, I believe, with Black Adam.
Yeah, these executives have made him humble, made The Rock humble. And the thing is, I admit I've been a little glib about why is The Rock so obsessed with this? Why is The Rock being so desperate when it comes to making this a hit? And it's because, we've figured out that this equation doesn't work, but in The Rock's head, it should have worked. That equation of huge star plus superhero.
Yeah.
And the superhero genre is dominant. And yes, there some fatigue. Yes, but is it going to be dominant for the next decade? Probably, right? I mean, there's nothing to say that it's not going to be one of the prominent genres in film for the next 10 years. And if The Rock can't get a taste of that, because certainly Marvel wasn't knocking at his door, and Marvel's certainly not going to be knocking at his door now. He is now precluded. The door has been shut for him to do superhero IP unless he tries to do some sort of original superhero, like Hitch or something like that Big Willie did back in the day.
Hancock. Hitch was the rom-com.
I'm sorry, Hancock. You're right, Hancock, which was a hit, and that was part of Big Willie's streak.
And Hitch was a hit too.
But this is, cutting him off from a major vein of American blockbuster cinema, worldwide blockbuster cinema. And that's why he is so salty about this. This is why he is desperately trying to be still a part of the DCU. And I understand it, but at this point, he does have to save face by walking away, because this is truly embarrassing at every level. When you have just random Warner Brothers executives, and they weren't named, obviously, they don't want to be named, several, it's not one. It wasn't one person's opinion. It was several people's opinion that this was falsified information. And that is, like we said, it's damning. And he's just going to have to deal with reality. And this may be his biggest humbling since he hurt his knee playing football.
Wow, that's going back. This is the most
Right?
humbled that Dwayne The Rock Johnson has been since he didn't make the NFL.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing is he is not used to those kinds of humbling.
Right, right, right. One of
It's
his
been
bigger
so long.
humblings was having to play in the Canadian Football League. And
Hmm.
in some ways, being a movie star but not having access to superhero movies is the equivalent of having to go play in the CFL. You know,
Hmm.
you're close to the majors, but you're just not quite there.
Yeah.
And I like you said, I get it because being in superhero movies is one of the greatest and easiest paydays in movie stardom. It makes sense for Dwayne The Rock Johnson to look at the Chris's, to look at your Robert Downey Jr.'s and see those paychecks they're cashing over and over and over again for putting the cape on and wanting a piece of that for himself. And Black Adam should have been that, but it is pretty clear it is not going to be that. And it's something I've been saying for weeks and weeks and weeks
All right.
now.
This is
And
see, I love this. I love that you're saying this, but what this is doing is misleading a lot of people who have just started listening or watching this podcast.
weeks and weeks
I
I've
am the
I've been
one.
banging the drum that Black Adam is a failure and has always been a
3 weeks
failure.
is not weeks and weeks. I've been
Weeks and
saying this
weeks
since
and
the
weeks.
jump.
Weeks and weeks and weeks.
Well, then, if
Eh,
I'm just going to keep saying weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks for every week that I said that this was a failure, then we're going to have a much longer podcast than we want to be doing. Okay.
Listen, people love the show, so I don't think length is an issue. But something else that I think is part of this story here. So Matt Bellany in Puck, of course, past guest of the BO Boys. I'm sure he'll be on again in the future. He called this one of the sillier trade stories of all time. So that is what he said about the Deadline article that tries to purport that Black Adam is a success filled with misleading information via The Rock, called it one of the sillier trade stories of all time. Is this, and listen, we don't ever want to call out our box office analyst brethren. That's how we're about talking about the movies, about the numbers, not about, petty media squabbles. But I do think this is a bit of a black mark, or at least a Black Adam mark on
It's a bit.
Deadline
Yeah.
for putting this article out, trying to purport that Black Adam is a success using, you know, all these downstream revenue streams as evidence. And, I get it. The Rock, basically, it's clear that Dwayne The Rock Johnson came to them and said, let's do this story. Biggest movie star on the planet, or at least one of them. And so it makes sense to that they would consider doing this, but in retrospect, they ended up with egg on their face. And a fellow box office entertainment titan, Matt Bellany, calling it one of the sillier trade stories he's seen. So it doesn't look great for Deadline to have run with this story.
I mean, it's a bit of a stumble, a bit of a stumble. And
Mm-hmm.
I will say, to say it's silly is downplaying it a little bit because here's what I'll say.
Okay.
I invoked Dan Rather earlier, who
Mm-hmm.
obviously had to step down from his post because of some reporting that was done on his part.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that's going to be the case with Anthony D. D stands for Dwayne Alessandro. But what I will say is that every episode that we do of this show,
Mm-hmm.
the main source for information that we use is Deadline. And
Mm-hmm.
when we were going to do this episode, I went automatically Pavlovian to
Mm,
Deadline. And then I remembered, oh, wait, this is about how Deadline got it wrong. And
right.
so, of course, there's not going to be any article on Deadline about this, huh?
Huh?
That old article is still up. All the comments are just people who are reinforcing this falsity.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so it feels to me like nothing's going to come of this, right? It's going to be business as usual over at Deadline.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you, it's really shaken my belief in Deadline as a source for us. I mean, obviously, we got to do the write through. The write through, Anthony's write through is the best thing that comes out on the weekend. It's must read, and that
Must
is
read
still
every
the case.
weekend. Yeah.
Every weekend, it's a must read. And listen, we've poked him gently about his biases before. He obviously has studios that he likes more than others and things like that. He's got his
Anthony D is for Disney
picadillos.
D'Alessandro
Yeah, so
and
he's
so
got
on
his
and so forth.
picadillos and listen, it's all in love.
Of course.
But this feels a bridge. This feels a bridge a little bit too far, and I don't think it's silly. I think it's
Okay.
serious.
Okay.
And so it is one of those things where my faith is a little bit shaken. We'll have to see going forward. I'm going to take things more with a grain of salt from him, and it's not great. It's not great.
Well, I mean, the thing is, we use Deadline as a source, for demo information and things such as here's all the different advertisers that partnered up with a movie and so on and so
Yeah,
forth. But of course, we've got the numbers, we've got different tracking
Box
services that
Office
are
Pro. Yeah,
of
we
course
use
there's
them.
a,
We use them
and
all.
the main thing here, and this is for all of our listeners, for the wannabe O boys, wannabe O girls, wannabe O people,
People.
there's all these different numbers out there and there's all these different articles about what's going on, but it's about cutting through that and figuring out what's really happening and
Hmm.
analyzing the stories and the numbers and the news and breaking it down. And I'm so glad that Matt Bellany at Puck went to the Warner sources, found out that the Deadline article had misleading numbers coming from The Rock. But we figured that out last week on
Hmm.
our weekend preview episode from last week, where we spent the whole episode on this story. We called it from the beginning. We said Anthony D. D stands for Dwayne D'Alessandro. We knew right off the bat that article was a plant from The Rock, that everything came from Dwayne The Rock Johnson. We knew that,
Hmm.
and that's what you get from listening to the BO Boys and from reading Scott Mendelson of Forbes, from following Jeff Bach as Civil Relations Co. The people at our level, you're getting everything broken down. We're cutting through the noise. We are looking at the numbers, but then telling you what they mean, looking at these articles, but telling you what they mean. So it was obvious from the start that Deadline article was a plant from The Rock, that it was, like we said last week, a response to the upcoming news that James Gunn was basically wiping the slate clean of the Snyderverse, was not going to go forward with a Black Adam 2. And The Rock went to Deadline preemptively and tried to create this online fervor for Black Adam, saying it was profitable. That was all apparent as soon as all of that dropped. It's great that is getting confirmed for us, that
Hmm.
Warner Brothers executives basically confirmed that to Matt Bellany, but we knew this a week ago, and we told you this a week ago.
Yeah.
And that is why you got to listen to the BO Boys, and you got to tell your friends to listen to the BO Boys, and they got to tell their friends, and so on and so forth, because we will continue cutting through the noise and telling you what's really happening.
Yeah. 100%.
All right.
So, Pat, we'll of course stay on this story
Yes.
as it further develops. But, you know, tune
Mm-hmm.
in what is it going to be, 2 days, to hear us talk about what could be the biggest movie of the year,
Yep.
Avatar: The Way of Water.
Yeah. It's going to be huge. I cannot wait to preview it, and then the following episode to talk about how it actually did. I mean, this is what we do this for. Is for the
Mm-hmm.
opening of a movie like Avatar: Way of Water.
Yep, absolutely. Now, Pat, so where can people find us?
I mean, they could email us at theboboyspodcast@gmail.com. Again, send us your predictions for what Avatar: Way of Water is going to do. We want to get some predictions in on that episode. So send us emails, theboboyspodcast@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter at the BO Boys Pod. So much great content there. Videos out the wazoo now. We are making videos. Fuck it, we're doing it live. We are filming the show, and some of the videos go on Twitter. We've also now got a YouTube channel. So the YouTube channel link, it's going to be right in the description of this episode. So go there and subscribe. We're putting the full episodes up. We're putting clips up. So even if you already subscribe to the podcast on a podcast feed, go subscribe on the YouTube channel, because that is going to be a huge part of spreading the word of the BO Boys, is getting us out there on YouTube. So you could hear us, and now you could see us.
And here's a little tease. So we were talking in the BO Boys offices before we got on camera, and we were, talking by the water cooler about possibly purchasing webcams. So, I mean, that's something in the future. I mean, that's something that could happen sooner rather than later.
Yeah, we could pull the trigger on those Amazon purchases at a moment's notice. And as good as we look now, this is just through, and this is if you're watching us on YouTube, this is just through the built-in cameras on our laptops, and this is how good we look. Look at this. This is how good we look right now. Once we get those webcams, it's going to be next level. So that's happening any day now. So follow us on YouTube. Follow the progression of the BO Boys faces from built-in cams to plug-in webcams. It's going to be fantastic.
Nice. Well, Pat, I think we did it.
Yeah, we did it.
And I don't think there's anything left to say, except until next time,
we'll smell you at the box office. Nailed it.